husband of 39 years handed me divorce papers on a Tuesday morning and told me he was taking the house, the retirement accounts, and the lake cabin we built together with our own hands. My attorney begged me to fight. Instead, I signed every single page. He poured himself a glass of champagne that same evening. What he didn't know was that I'd already made 3 phone calls that would change everything. Good day, dear listeners. This is Nina, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Please like this video and let me know in the comments what city you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me tell you what happened when my husband of 39 years decided I was disposable. I was 64 years old when my world came apart, and I want you to understand what that means. Not 64 the way magazines talk about it, with their silver-haired women doing yoga on beaches. I mean 64 with bad knees and a mortgage I thought was almost paid off. 64 with a teaching pension that covered maybe half my monthly expenses. 64 in a small town in North Carolina where everybody knew my husband's name and nobody would have believed what he was doing behind closed doors. His name was Gerald. We met at a church picnic in 1986. He was charming in that easy southern way, good with a handshake, remembered everyone's birthday. He sold commercial real estate and did well enough at it. We had 2 children, a son who lives out in Colorado now, and a daughter right here in Raleigh. I taught 4th grade for 31 years. I coached the spelling bee team. I organized every Christmas pageant this side of Wake County. I baked casseroles for sick neighbors and kept our family calendar running like a trained schedule. I thought we were happy, or maybe I thought we were stable and I'd confused the two. The first sign I missed was the gym membership. Gerald had never set foot inside a gym in his life. He'd always laughed at what he called men running on hamster wheels. Then suddenly, in January, he joined one. Didn't mention it to me. I found the charge on the credit card statement, $79 a month at a place called Fit Life, over on Crabtree Valley. When I asked about it, he said his doctor had recommended it for his blood pressure. That made sense. I didn't push. Then came the wardrobe. Dress shirts I'd never seen before, folded into the back of the closet. A pair of shoes that cost more than our first car payment. Cologne I didn't recognize on his collar when he came home from what he said were client dinners. I told myself it was a professional thing. Image matters in real estate. I believed what I needed to believe. It was my daughter who finally said what I couldn't let myself think. She came over for Sunday dinner in March and she watched Gerald for about 20 minutes before she followed me into the kitchen and said quietly, "Mom, is Dad okay? He's acting strange." "Strange how?" I asked. "Like somebody who's hiding something," she said. I changed the subject, but that night I lay awake and thought about the gym membership and the shoes and the cologne, and I started adding things up in a way I'd been refusing to do. The breaking point came on a Friday in April. Gerald came home for dinner, sat down at the table I'd set, and ate about 4 bites of the pot roast I'd had in the slow cooker all day. Then he set his fork down, very carefully, and said my name the way you say someone's name when you've rehearsed it. He said he wanted a divorce. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming. I remember looking at his hands, the wedding ring he still wore, and thinking something completely strange. I thought, he's going to want that ring back. I asked him why. He said we'd grown in different directions. He said he needed something he couldn't explain, but he knew I'd understand. He said this in the tone of a man who has been told by someone else that his wife will understand, that she's reasonable, that she won't make a scene. I didn't make a scene. I asked him about the finances, what he was proposing, and that's when I saw it, the flicker of something almost like relief in his eyes, because this was the conversation he'd prepared for. He slid a folder across the table. His attorney had already drawn up terms. He would keep the house. It was in his name, always had been, something I'd never questioned because we were married and it was our house. He would keep the retirement accounts he built through his business. He would keep the lake cabin in Hendersonville. I would receive $1,800 a month in support for 3 years, after which it would end. I had my pension, he said. I'd be fine. I looked at that folder for a long moment, then I closed it. I told him I needed time to think. He said, of course, take a week. His voice was gentle, practiced. He'd been coached on how to handle me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, and I did what I'd done my whole life when I needed to think clearly. I made a list. On one side, I wrote everything that was in my name. On the other side, I wrote everything that wasn't. The list on the right side of the page went on and on. The list on the left had my car, my teaching pension, and a savings account with $11,000 in it. That was 39 years of marriage. That was what I had to show. I gave myself about 10 minutes to cry. Then I dried my face, made coffee, and picked up the phone. My daughter drove over at 7 in the morning. She took one look at me and didn't say anything, just put her arms around me and held on. When I told her everything, the folder, the terms, the accounts, I felt her go very still. "Mom," she said, "don't sign anything." "I know," I told her. "Do you know a financial attorney, not just a divorce attorney, someone who can look at where the money actually is?" I didn't, but she did, because my daughter works in hospital administration and she is the kind of person who always knows exactly who to call. Within 24 hours she had a name for me. A forensic accountant named, well, I'll call him Mr. Whitfield, because he asked me not to use his name publicly. He'd helped untangle a complicated estate case for one of her colleagues. Expensive, she warned me, but thorough. I used money from my personal savings account to pay his consultation fee. Gerald had always let me manage the household spending, groceries, utilities. When they were young, he thought of it as beneath him. What he didn't realize was that 31 years of teaching elementary school had made me very, very good at keeping records of everything. Mr. Whitfield's office was in downtown Raleigh on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and good coffee. He was a quiet man, methodical, the kind who doesn't speak until he has something worth saying. I told him everything: the sudden divorce, the prepared settlement, the accounts I didn't have direct access to, the charges I'd noticed over the past 2 years that hadn't quite added up. He asked me what kind of charges. I pulled out the folder I brought with me, 2 years of credit card statements I'd photographed on my phone and printed at the library. I'd highlighted the ones that didn't fit. Wire transfers to a company called Crestline Property Group, recurring payments to a LLC called GH Consulting that I'd never heard Gerald mention, cash withdrawals every Friday, always between $400 and $600. Mr. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. Then he asked me if Gerald had ever mentioned Crestline Property Group. I said no. He typed something into his computer. Then he looked at me over his glasses and said, "Mrs." And then he used my name. He said, "Before we go further, I want to be honest with you. If your husband has been structuring his finances the way this looks, what we find may be more than just a divorce matter. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the folder on the kitchen table, the $1,800 a month for 3 years. I thought about what 39 years had actually cost me, in time and ambition, and the years I didn't take the department chair position because Gerald said it would be too stressful for our family schedule. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." The next 10 days were the strangest of my life. I moved through my normal routines: grocery shopping, church on Sunday, a coffee with a friend on Thursday, while quietly photographing every document in Gerald's home office that I could access. Bank statements from accounts I was technically a joint owner of. Business records he'd left in unlocked filing cabinets because he'd never once imagined I would look. I felt like a woman I'd never met, someone colder and more deliberate than the 4th grade teacher who made her students Valentines every February. Gerald noticed the change in me. Of course he did. I'd gone quiet in a way that wasn't defeat. It was something else, and somewhere underneath his confidence I think he sensed it. "Have you looked at the papers?" he asked one evening. "I'm still reviewing them," I said. His jaw moved. Margaret, he started and then caught himself. He'd almost used the wrong name. I filed that away. Mr. Whitfield called me on a Wednesday afternoon. He asked me to come in. I sat across from him while he laid documents across his desk in careful order. Crestline Property Group, he told me, was registered to Gerald. Not under his full name, but under a variation of his middle name, and a silent partner whose address traced back to a mail forwarding service in Charlotte. Over the past 4 years, Gerald had been routing commissions through Crestline before they ever appeared in any account I could see. The total, Mr. Whitfield said, was somewhere in the range of $340,000. I heard that number and felt the room tilt. There was more. JH Consulting. Gerald's initials, I realized, staring at the page, had received payments from 2 of his largest commercial clients. Payments that looked like referral fees but that his firm's contracts explicitly prohibited. His firm didn't know yet, but the paper trail was clear. And there was a woman, Mr. Whitfield said carefully. He'd not been hired to investigate that, but certain financial records pointed to consistent personal expenditures, hotels, restaurants, jewellery, connected to someone who was not me. Based on the billing addresses, she lived in Charlotte. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked what our options were. He walked me through them. We could expose everything at once, or we could proceed strategically. I chose strategically. I contacted a divorce attorney my daughter had also researched, a woman named, I'll call her Patricia because that feels right, who specialized in high-asset divorces in North Carolina. I did not tell Gerald. I kept setting his dinner on the table, kept asking about his day, kept being the woman he'd decided was no threat. The papers I'd signed were the original terms he'd offered. My attorney filed her own, simultaneously with a motion to freeze joint assets and a formal inquiry into Crestline Property Group filed with the NC Real Estate Commission. Gerald came home that evening like a man who'd been told the house was on fire. He didn't knock. He didn't say hello. He slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the framed photos in the hallway, our daughter's college graduation, our son at his wedding, a family portrait from 2009, when we all still smiled the same way. He stormed into the kitchen where I was standing at the counter with a glass of sweet tea, and the look on his face was something I had never seen in 39 years. Pure, unguarded fury. "What did you do?" he said. "I froze the accounts," I said. "I filed a complaint with the Real Estate Commission. I retained my own attorney." "You don't understand what you've done." His voice had dropped, which was worse than shouting. "I have deals in progress, Margaret. This will destroy." "My name," I said quietly, "is not Margaret." He stopped. "I am 64 years old," I told him. "I taught school for 31 years. I raised your children and kept your house and drove your mother to chemotherapy every Tuesday for 14 months when you were too busy to do it, and for 4 years you hid $340,000 from this marriage. So you can call your attorney, and I will call mine, and we will let the court sort out what's fair." He left without another word. The door closed quietly this time, which felt worse than the slam. The next few weeks moved in a blur of legal filings and sleepless nights and moments of cold clarity at the kitchen table with my reading glasses and a yellow legal pad. My daughter came over every few days. My son flew in from Colorado when she told him what was happening. He sat across from me at the same table where Gerald had handed me that folder, and he said, "Mom, tell me what you need." I told him I needed him to go back to his family, because I was going to be all right. I meant it mostly. He left some money with my daughter just in case, and she didn't tell me about it until months later. Gerald's attorney reached out through mine. A proposed new settlement, significantly more generous. The house, a larger support payment, 5 years instead of 3. All I had to do was withdraw the complaint with the Real Estate Commission. My attorney called to walk me through it. "It's a better offer," she said, neutrally. "But the commission complaint is what has him scared. His firm just opened their own inquiry. If you drop it, everything goes away for him." I thought about that for approximately 30 seconds. "No," I said. Then came the day she showed up. I was in the backyard pulling weeds from my garden. I've always grown tomatoes, peppers, a little bit of everything, when I heard a car in the driveway. A white Mercedes I didn't recognize. I came around the side of the house still holding my gardening gloves, and she was standing at my front door. She was younger than I'd expected, 42, 43 maybe, dressed in a way that said money but also said trying. She turned when she heard me, and she smiled the kind of smile that is not a smile. "You must be Nina," she said. "Gerald has told me so much about you." I looked at her. I looked at the ring on her left hand, which was substantial. I thought, Gerald bought that with money he hid from me. I said, "Would you like to come inside?" She followed me into the kitchen, and I offered her coffee, which she declined. She sat down across from me and folded her hands and said that she knew this was hard, but sometimes people simply outgrew each other, and Gerald deserved to be happy, and surely I could see that fighting this would only hurt me in the end. I said, "How long have you known about the commission inquiry?" Her expression shifted. "Because," I continued, "the accounts you benefited from, the jewelry, the hotels, the Mercedes out front, those were funded through Crestline Property Group, which means you've been the recipient of assets that are legally half mine. My attorney is very interested in the specifics." She said, "That's not." I said, "Did he tell you about his firm's internal investigation? They found the same things we found. He's being terminated. The inquiry has been referred to the State Attorney General's office." Her face had gone the colour of old chalk. "I think," I said very gently, "that you should talk to your own attorney before you talk to me again." She left without finishing her coffee. I watched the Mercedes back out of my driveway and disappear down the street, and I stood in my kitchen in my gardening clothes and took a long, slow breath. Then I went back to my tomatoes. The hearing was held on a September morning, cool and bright. I barely slept, but I'd pressed my good blue dress and eaten actual breakfast because my daughter had insisted. She was in the gallery. My son had called that morning from Colorado, 7 a.m. his time, just to say he was thinking about me. Gerald sat at the defendant's table with two attorneys. He looked smaller than I remembered. The man who had once dominated every room he walked into was sitting very still, not meeting anyone's eyes. The judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp and unhurried. My attorney presented the evidence, the Crestline account, the GH consulting payments, 4 years of systematically redirected marital income. Mr. Whitfield testified to the financial specifics. Gerald's firm had completed their own investigation, and a representative was present to confirm what they'd found. Criminal referral to the State Attorney General was pending. Gerald's attorneys objected, argued, and tried very hard to reframe this as a complicated business matter that I had misunderstood. The judge listened to all of it without changing her expression. Then my attorney asked the court to hear a brief statement from me. I had written it out and revised it 4 times. When I stood up, I didn't look at the page. I said that I was 64 years old, and that I'd spent 39 years building a life I thought we were building together. I said that I'd given up a career advancement to support his. I had managed our household, raised our children, cared for his parents. I had trusted him completely, which turned out to be the most expensive decision I'd ever made. I said that what I was asking for was not revenge. I was asking for what was legally and morally mine. And I said, because I meant it and I wanted it on the record, that I was not doing this only for myself. I was doing it because somewhere out there, another woman was sitting at a kitchen table, looking at papers that would take everything from her, and she needed to know that she had options. The courtroom was quiet when I sat down. Gerald was looking at the table. The judge's preliminary ruling froze all Crestline assets, awarded me temporary possession of the house, set temporary support at $4,500 a month, and noted that given the pending criminal referral, she would be watching the final proceedings closely. Gerald made a sound I had not heard from him before, something between a word and nothing. 30 days later, the final hearing. A lot had changed in 30 days. Gerald had been formally terminated. His real estate license had been suspended pending the Attorney General's investigation. His firm had filed a civil suit against him for the client referral fees. The woman, she had returned to Charlotte. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had ended things by text message. Gerald was staying in a corporate extended stay hotel off I-40, driving a car I didn't recognize. The final ruling took about 20 minutes to read into the record. I received the house outright with no mortgage remaining. I received 60% of all retirement accounts and liquid assets, including those recovered from Crestline. I received spousal support of $5,000 per month for the next 12 years, which would accrue as a legal judgment if he failed to pay. Gerald was responsible for all my legal fees. The judge included a note in her written opinion about the deliberate and sustained nature of the financial concealment, and that note would follow Gerald into every legal proceeding that came after. I walked out of that courthouse into autumn sunlight with my daughter beside me, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and real, and like myself for the first time in a very long time. Gerald's criminal case moved slowly, as these things do. The State Attorney General's office eventually charged him with 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of tax evasion. He accepted a plea agreement, no trial. He served 14 months in a minimum security facility and was released. He lost his license permanently. The civil judgment from his former firm will follow him for the rest of his working life. Last I heard, he's selling used cars somewhere outside of Fayetteville, making a small fraction of what he once made, paying a portion of every paycheck to me and to his former firm and to the IRS. As for her, I don't track her life. I learned from the mutual acquaintance that she'd moved twice since Charlotte, that she'd tried to reinvent herself, that spotlight of Gerald's case had made things complicated for her in ways she hadn't anticipated. I don't wish her ill. I simply don't think about her very much. 6 months after the final judgment, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. I sold the house. I know, after everything. But here's the thing about winning. Sometimes winning means you get to decide what you actually want, not just what you were fighting to keep. That house had Gerald in every room. It had the kitchen table where he'd handed me that folder, and the hallway where he'd slammed the door, and the driveway where she'd parked her Mercedes. I didn't want to eat breakfast every morning in a place that smelled like someone else's choices. So I sold it, and I bought a smaller house in a neighborhood I'd always liked, near a greenway where I walked most mornings. My daughter helped me paint the bedroom a soft green that I would never have been allowed to choose before. My son installed a reading nook in the study and stocked it with books he thought I'd like, most of which I did. I planted a garden twice the size of my old one, and this past summer I grew more tomatoes than I could possibly eat and gave most of them away to the neighbors. I went back to school, community college, 2 nights a week, a memoir writing class that I signed up for on a whim, and that turned out to matter more to me than almost anything I've done in the past decade. I've started writing down what happened, carefully, honestly, not for Gerald, not even for the courts, for myself. For the version of me who was sitting at that kitchen table at midnight, terrified, who needed to know she was going to be okay. I travel when I can. Last spring I went to see my son in Colorado, and we hiked a trail in Rocky Mountain National Park that left my knees complaining for a week and my heart completely full. I'm planning a trip to Portugal in the fall with a friend from my book club, a woman who has her own story of starting over, and we have already agreed that we will eat very good food and stay out too late and not apologize to anyone. I have not started dating. That may change. But I've learned something important in these past 2 years, which is that I am genuinely fine on my own, not managing, not making do, but actually fine. Content. That's not a small thing. I spent 39 years making sure everyone around me was comfortable, and I had forgotten what my own comfort even felt like. One afternoon last fall, I was working in the garden when a car slowed down on the street in front of my house. I didn't recognize it at first, and then I did, the used car lot sedan, the kind Gerald would have called embarrassing 2 years ago. He sat there for a moment. I could see him watching. I straightened up, brushed the dirt off my gloves, and looked back at him across the garden I planted and the house that was mine. He drove away. I went back to my tomatoes. Here's what I want you to take from my story, and I mean this for every woman who is sitting somewhere right now feeling like she has no options. Know your finances. Not because you're expecting the worst, but because you deserve to understand the life you're helping to build. Put your name on things. Ask questions. Keep records. It doesn't mean you don't trust your partner. It means you respect yourself. And if the day ever comes when someone hands you a folder and tells you to sign, don't sign anything until you've made 3 phone calls of your own. I'm 66 years old. I walk the Greenway every morning. I grow too many tomatoes. I'm writing a memoir that I may or may not ever finish. I am, against all reasonable expectation, exactly where I want to be. What would you have done? I'd love to hear from you. And if my story helped even one person today, please share it. You never know who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to Nina's stories. I still think about that kitchen table sometimes. The way the folder sat there under the overhead light, so neat, so final. Gerald had expected me to cry. Maybe to beg, and the old me, the one who'd spent decades making sure everyone else in that house was comfortable, might have done exactly that. What I've come to understand is that what happened to me wasn't only Gerald's doing, it was also mine, in a way I had to sit with honestly before I could move past it. For years I had quietly handed over control of the accounts, of the titles, of the decisions, because I trusted him, and because I didn't want to seem suspicious or difficult. I told myself that was love. Looking back, I think it was something closer to fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being seen as someone who didn't fully believe in her own marriage. And that fear cost me dearly. Gerald made his choices, and those choices had consequences. Not because the universe punished him. I don't think it works quite that cleanly. But because dishonesty is a structure that eventually collapses under its own weight. He spent 4 years building something on a foundation of hidden accounts and false paperwork. And when one thread got pulled, everything came down with it. That's not fate. That's just how things tend to go when a person builds their life around what they can take, rather than what they can give. What saved me was not luck. It was the part of myself I had never quite given away, even after 39 years of putting myself last. It was the 30 years of keeping records and balancing ledgers and knowing on some quiet level that numbers don't lie even when people do. I had to be smart enough to recognize what I was looking at, and honest enough with myself to stop pretending I wasn't seeing it. That took longer than I'd like to admit. And then, once I understood what I was facing, I had to decide whether I was willing to fight. Not in anger. Anger would have made me reckless, but from a place of clear-eyed determination. That distinction mattered. There were nights when the fear was so heavy I could barely breathe. When Gerald's attorney was sending letters, and the legal fees were climbing and everything felt uncertain. I stayed the course anyway, not because I was certain I would win, but because I knew I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. My daughter showed up with groceries on a Wednesday when I had nothing left. My son flew across the country on a Tuesday morning because he heard in his sister's voice that his mother needed him. I had spent 39 years holding everyone else up, and I had forgotten, genuinely forgotten, that I was allowed to let people hold me. Learning to receive that was its own kind of lesson, one I'm still practicing. I'm 66 now. My garden is bigger than it's ever been. I walk the Greenway most mornings, and sometimes I think about the woman who sat at that table in the dark, terrified and alone, adding up the numbers on a yellow legal pad. I want to tell her what I eventually figured out, that integrity isn't just about what you do when people are watching. It's about what you do when everything is on the line and the easiest thing in the world would be to give up. And that strength, real strength, doesn't announce itself. It just keeps showing up quietly one morning at a time.